My name is Alana Greer. I'm an attorney at Elsesser Project, which is a civil rights racial justice organization out of Washington, D.C. And at the end of July, I'm actually going to be joining Chuck and Mina Jagannath, who's also here at the Community Justice Project of Florida Legal Services. And I am so excited to be here today to hear both from Chuck and from Vince, but also from all of you. We're hoping to take a little time to let folks have some time to process what they've heard today, what they've thought about today, and how you're all thinking about your role in this movement, your role as lawyers, or for those of us who aren't lawyers in the space, where you fit in and how today has maybe challenged that thinking, inspired that thinking, and any thoughts you have taking away from that. So I want to just take a few seconds to introduce folks here. Chuck Elsesser is an attorney with the Community Justice Project of Florida Legal Services, and he's been specializing in representing community organizations in affordable housing litigation and policy advocacy on a number of different issues. He spent more than 30 years doing this work in California, and for the past 12 years has been in Florida. Chuck has received a number of different honors. My favorite in the biography, though, was some accolades from Tony Romano, who is an organizing director with the Right to the City Alliance. And Tony described Mr. Elsesser as a master of his craft and praised his ability to understand that a lawsuit is just a tactic. It's the organizing campaign and the residents' power that is most important. Those are lovely tributes. And so we're really excited to hear from him. And also Vince Warren, who's the executive director of the Center for Constitutional Rights, a national legal and educational organization dedicated to advancing and defending the rights guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Many of you who I think are interning for this summer, if not otherwise involved with. Vince oversees CCR's litigation as well as their advocacy work, including their challenges to the legal detention at Guantanamo. He spearheaded their public campaign, Beyond Guantanamo, Rescue the Constitution, and prior to his work at CCR, Vince was a national senior staff attorney at the ACLU and worked on a number of landmark cases, including Grants v. Bollinger, and monitored South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings, as well as a number of other really exciting things I know you'll all have learned about and want to continue hearing about today. So without further ado, we're going to let folks do a little reflection time on your own for a few minutes. It's going to take 3 minutes. And you're welcome. If you have paper, this isn't the one that we want you to turn in, so if you can write it, whatever. You can color, you can draw, free space, which I know you don't get a lot of in law school. So for students, we hope you can use it well. And we just want to ask you how you're feeling today. Just after hearing the speakers who've been in front of you, the panelists, talking to folks in this space, how are you feeling? And go for it. We'll check back in about 3 minutes. So we'd ask just to partner with whoever's sitting next to you. We're going to do a few other questions, and for these questions, we're going to ask you just to jot down. You're going to each have 2.5 minutes to share with each other what your answer is, and just jot down like a quick phrase of maybe that synthesizes what your response was, that we can maybe share together as a group. And then we'll also have some time to share some of those more directly, or ask questions of our panelists and of each other at the end, towards the end. So if you guys just want to figure out who your partner is, and I'll ask the first question. So there's already some great stuff coming in. Anger and passion equals motivation. Inaction will lead to the destruction of humanity. Our action can change the world for the better. A lot of things about movement activities that people didn't know about before. A 31-day sit-in in the state capitol. Issues going on in Israel and Palestine. Similarity between the struggles worldwide and the tension and synergy between community organizers and lawyers in movement work. Youth, I like the simplicity. Courage, the meaning of radical. Learning about the practices we can focus on and make our values the core part of the work we do. International solidarity, love. Some great stuff, and so we'll share some more of these as we go on. The next question, we'll have do both of those. The next question, we'll do the same sharing in your groups, is as you look towards life as a movement lawyer, or if you're not a lawyer, whatever your role in this movement is, over the long haul, what are the challenges and concerns you have about sticking to that path?
About what?
About sticking to that path. What are the challenges or concerns you have about being a lawyer in a movement, or being whatever role it is you have in this movement if you're not a lawyer or a law student? And so we're going to now turn our attention to our panel here and our guests. where we're going to have the chance to ask them a few questions about how they reflect and process their work so far and their work going forward. And to start us off, we wanted to harken back to a tradition, a question that Ella Baker liked to ask. So she often asks, who are your people? And what did that mean? I think you can answer it in a number of different ways. But for the purpose of this exercise, the purpose Ella Baker engaged in that line of questioning was, who are the people that you define yourself by? Who are the people that you surround yourself by? Who are your allies? Who are your people? And so starting off on that note, let's ask Chuck, and an important caveat for Chuck, it was actually 22 years, not 12 years. It was an outdated biography that I was reading from. So,
I was in California for 24 years and practicing, and then 22 years in Miami. And actually, it's interesting because I think my answer might be a little bit different in California than in Miami, but my people, the way I would define that is my people are the people that I work with particularly in public housing. The women that I work with in public housing are the groups, the tenants groups in particular, but also multiple home park tenants, are the people that I feel closest to, that I sort of, you know, I get my energy from, I talk to about, you know, things, and that more than anybody. The organizers kind of come and go, but the people don't. And it's been a long time, and a lot of the women I've known now since like 95, 96. So it's been a long time. They're still, you know, still in the fight. And so there aren't a lot of people that stay in the fight. I mean, people come and go, and people die, people move on, and particularly, you know, activists come and go, move to another place. But the people that grew up there and stay there, and the people you fight alongside them, they tend to stay. And so when I think about it, I think about that. In LA, I also had people that I went to law school with. I had a kind of a broader circle, but in Miami, those are my people.
I think of my people as people that inspire me, people who I'm accountable to, people that I'm building with, and so of the people that I'm building with, which is probably at this point in my career, I've been practicing for 22 years. At this point in my life, in my career, it's the people that I'm building with. It's the people that share the vision that I have, the people that come to you and say, why aren't we doing this? And I say, yeah, why aren't we doing that? But they're not going to just get pissed off and go someplace else, but they're really actually going to say there, and let's try out a few things. Like, those are the people that I tend to gravitate towards. They're people that I trust. I either trust politically, that I think have integrity. So there are people on my staff, just about everybody at CCR, I really very strongly consider my people. And when I worked at the ACLU, there were some people that I considered my people, not everybody. That's okay. It's really about the people who are willing to sacrifice something, some comfort, or engage in some discomfort to figure out a question that's bigger than we are. Those are the people that I tend to gravitate towards, the people that I feel like I learn from the most.
So I'm sure both of you have had many different opportunities, many paths you could have traveled on, whether to become a lawyer or not, whether to become a public interest lawyer or not, whether to be, you know, within that world to become a movement lawyer, a social justice lawyer, an activist. What were the formative aha moments or experiences that cemented you on this path later?
I'll go first. You know, it's funny. I want to tell you that I never knew I was going to be a civil rights lawyer, but Dr. Seuss had this book, which maybe some of you have. It's called My Book About Me. Does anybody know that book? Right, it's an old book, and you could write down when you're a little kid how many buttons you have in your house and how many doorknobs, and get the signature of the the letter carrier, and it asks what do you want to be when you grow up. And I wrote two things. I wrote drummer and civil rights lawyer. I was 7 years old, and I'd forgotten about it. My mother pointed it out to me when I graduated from law school. So in some weird way, I always knew that I was going to be a civil rights lawyer, but I didn't really know why. I mean, I thought it was cool, but I didn't know why I wanted to do it. But my aha moment actually came, I had two, and they both actually related to South Africa. My first aha moment was when I began to get involved in college in the divestment struggles around apartheid, anti-apartheid work. And my aha moment was because I went to college before the internet, right? So it was hard to get information. I realized that I was translating a struggle to folks that were very comfortable in my school, but I was literally the only person that was going to be able to convince all of these folks, the student body, that we should divest. And I didn't know shit myself, but I thought I knew a lot, and I was very passionate. And I realized after we passed a student resolution to divest from business doing work in South Africa, I said, oh my God, I can do this. It was extraordinary for me. But the second aha moment came actually after I was a lawyer, when I was monitoring the Truth and Reconciliation hearings in South Africa and listening to the people who had been oppressed for so long, what they actually went through, what they were sharing, what they were not sharing, the deep emotion, the families that were spread apart. And I realized at that moment that all those years ago, when I had my first aha moment, I actually had no idea what I was talking about. I knew what was right, I knew what was the right thing to do morally, but I didn't have the analysis, the right analysis. It was good for the moment. But I realized in 1997 that my work as a lawyer, as a social justice activist, was actually much more complicated, more nuanced, and I needed more partners and allies than I had before.
It's a hard question for me, because I will disclose that we ask students when we interview them for the summer, what is it that got you into your interest in social justice? And it's always a very revealing question. And I always think, God, I'm glad nobody asked me that. But it was a really useful question. And I've thought a lot about what it is. And part of it is I graduated from college in '68. So it was right at the Vietnam War time. And so that kind of activated everybody. And I went to law school without a real good sense of why I wanted to be a lawyer, but a sort of a political, a developing political sense. And the one thing that I have in my mind as sort of an aha moment is the summer before going to law school, I figured out I should find out what lawyers do. Particularly kind of social justice lawyers or lawyers. So I volunteered at a legal services office without being a lawyer, without being anything. It was just a college graduate, and it was a legal services program in New Jersey, in Long Beach, in Atlantic City. And it was a terrible legal service. I mean, it was a Republican legal services program. But they sent me to work. They just had nothing to do with me. So they sent me to work with a group of tenants in the public housing project in New Jersey, in Atlantic City. And I was going to work with them. And I had no idea. I'm a white middle class boy that grew up went to Catholic school, that had no sense of what the hell I was doing. And I went to them, and they adopted me. I mean, they thought it was kind of fun. I was like a pet or something. I mean, they took me in a way that and accepted me and sort of said, we're going to help teach you kind of how you can be useful to us, in a way that was so incredibly exciting to me and understand. I mean, that was a formative summer for me, just working, trying to figure out how to be useful to them. And I then went into law school saying, I know what I want to do now. That was it. I mean, and I'd never looked back. So it wasn't like an aha moment, but it was really, I guess it was. I mean, it was just, I knew from that summer that this is what I want to do. I want to work with groups of people that I can be of help to. And And then the rest of my career has been trying to figure out how to do that, how I can be helpful. And I was stuck in law school. I had already signed up for law school, so I guess that was how I was going to do it. There wasn't a connection, but it clearly came first.
So, in this work, being truly accountable to communities, to individuals, whether it's your clients or partner organizations that are facing oppression, isn't an easy task. Can you talk about a moment when you think you might have gotten it wrong? And just in thinking through that, some of the challenges that folks talked about were, some common themes were burnout, not being good enough skills-wise, figuring out how to actually be effective with at the work that we're trying to do, how to stay focused, and how to make sure we're actually present to the needs of the communities we're serving. So just some of those in mind, but we'd love to hear from you too. Some of your times.
There were I can think of two scenarios or two times when I really don't feel like I got it right. One is structural, and the other one really, I think, was the way that I showed up. The structural one was when I was at the ACLU, I was doing systemic reform litigation, and we were reforming public defender systems. And so we had a statewide case in the state of Montana. Like, there were 6 black people in Montana, and when I left, to go back to New York, there were 5, right? And also, interestingly enough, not all of them were in jail. They were all on the Army base. All the people in jail were Indian. Just saying. But where I got it wrong was in the systemic litigation, we were challenging state funding to public defenders, and so our clients, however, were also the clients of public defenders. But when we rolled in as the ACLU to the Montana jail system, everybody said the ACLU is here. One of two things are going to happen: either we're going to get out of jail, or we're going to get money from this constitutional violation. Of course, neither one of those things were the goal of the litigation. And I didn't handle it as well as I could have. I explained it, we handed out little notes, you're not going to get any money, that this is about constitutional violation, and some people got it. But I feel like I failed folks by not taking, and there were thousands of people, so I'm not sure how I would have done it, but I feel like I failed folks by not looking them in the eye and kind of working it through with them. Because these guys, at the end of the day, and we did win big constitutional reforms, none of those guys got out of jail. Some of them got better lawyers. Nobody got any money. But at the end of the day, I got back on the plane and there were 5 black men in Montana again. And I have always felt like I could have done a better job just being a real person with these folks that were in jail. So at the very least, whether they liked it or not, that I felt that they really understood what I was trying to do. And the other thing that was more the way that I showed up was when I was working on the affirmative action case involving the University of Michigan. I was part of the team that was litigating the undergrad case in the late 90s that went to the Supreme Court. We represented interveners, and so the case, these affirmative action cases are white persons like, dude, I didn't get into school, so it must be racist. And the white university is like, dude, we like brown people, so it's not racist. But you have white institutions and white people that are fighting it out, and so we were intervening on behalf of Black and Latino high school students. And so we did the case, and we made the case. We ended up losing as to why diversity, but particularly using affirmative action to remedy past harm was important. But I did not meet with one, not a single African-American or Latino high school student during that entire litigation. Because the way it was framed is this thing's going to the Supreme Court, it's going to be a big deal, and it ended up being a big deal. But I didn't show up right. I was not the most senior lawyer on the case, and I felt like I kind of couldn't shift the paradigm. But looking back on it, what I should have done, if I had it to do over again, I would have said there is going to be a part of this litigation that is actually going to be really community-centered. We need to hear concretely what people are talking about, what the parents are talking about, what the kids are talking about, and that needs to really form how we litigate this. And we didn't do that as a litigation group, and I feel like I could have done much better.
May I ask you a quick follow-up on that?
Sure.
Do you think that would have impacted any legal outcomes from the case?
No. Supreme Court is terrible on affirmative action. The Sixth Circuit was slightly better, and the district court was pretty bad. It would not have, in terms of how it shows up in law books, if people have ever read, you know, Gratz versus Bollinger, it would not have made the edited version of the text. No law student would ever know that that had happened, and the people and the Supreme Court watchers would not care about it. But who would know and who would care would be the communities that are actually impacted by this. And so it would not have changed the case at all, but I think it would have been a better, a way with more integrity to have the voice of the communities really be a part of what we're trying to do.
I'm going to answer it a little bit differently, just because I've got those same experiences too, but I wanted to add something to it, which comes from a different kind of my life perspective. I mean, I want to say something and then I'll explain it, but I don't think I've ever gotten it right. And I say that coming from where I'm coming from. I mean, I grew up in an all-white neighborhood, in an all-white school, literally almost through college. And I carry that, and I mean, it's racist, and I'm in the middle of it, and I have been trying to unburden, trying to work through that my whole life, and you don't work. I mean, you are working through it every second of every day, your whole life, and so it's very hard. And I've not really talked about this before, but it is very hard to be authentic because you are constantly monitoring yourself for your own racism and your own homophobia and your all the things that all the baggage that you are carrying with you. There's a part of my brain that, you know, everything's got to go through before it comes out of my mouth, because I've got to check and say, is this my baggage or is this me? And it's tough, and that makes it tough. And so you're always not quite, you're always working through a screen. And I don't know any other way to do it. I've been doing this my whole life, I'll be doing it my whole life. It never stops. And so you are always checking yourself to try to fight. You're always working that, or I am. Now, people that have grown up, I mean, my daughter is a very different person than I am, and people have come from different places. This is my baggage. And it leads me to always be testing my accountability and testing whether I am being truly present for people, and whether I am truly being accountable, and it's really difficult, and it leads, you're always struggling to make sure that what you're doing is a reflection of your true self, or the self that you want to be, and your own wishes, and you're not playing out some vestige of what's left over in your brain, and so that's the struggle for me. Is in terms of accountability, is constantly and I would imagine even if you grew up later than I did, you have some of that. You have to have that, and it doesn't go away, except through constant working, and that's and so that's another gloss. I mean, it's not to say that I can't give you specific examples where I really screwed up, but it is a constant thing that you've got to be checking yourself when you've grown up from a place of privilege, from a place of racial entitlement, from a place of homophobia, and sexism. I mean, every one of those things. This was and you are then thrust into all these environments where you have got to struggle against them, it's just something that you've got to be doing because you want to be. You want at the same point to be able to be authentic to people, knowing that somewhere in the authentic person that you are, there's a lot of crap, and that you're always working through.
Can I comment on that? Because that's resonating with me, Chuck, very much. And I have, for a very long time, I was trying to shore up the part of me that fights white supremacy and fights white male privilege. At the same time that I'm trying to understand my own bias and privilege, my own internalized homophobia, my own internalized sexism, and to try to figure out a way to be able to kind of be in that moment all the time. And there have been times, and I want to tell you guys about a horrible thing that happened to me not too long ago at a CCR event, which I'm not proud of, but it's worth talking about because I think you really pulled this out. We were doing a showing of God Loves Uganda, which is an amazing film if you have not seen it, about the right-wing extremists in Uganda. CCR represents Central Minorities Uganda. They're our clients. And we were doing a talk back after the screening, and I'm standing with Frank Mugisha, and we're doing this talk back. Frank Mugisha is the head of SMO. And I'm going through sort of the state of the law in Uganda. And there was a point when, I think it was in 2008, where the Supreme Court in Uganda said that, issued a ruling that said LGBT folks in Uganda have the same rights as other people. And so that's what I was going to say, but what came out of my mouth was that LGBT people, the court said that LGBT people have the same rights as normal people. And I didn't hear it when it came out of my mouth, and I'm looking out at the crowd, and there is just horror on people's face. And so I'm continuing my talk, and then I'm doing it simultaneously. So I'm talking about what I'm talking about, but then I had this other thing in my brain. I said, what did I just say? And then I stopped and I said, did I just say normal people? And everybody said, yes, you said yes. So I apologized, and I moved on. But it almost devastated me. I mean, I was dazed. I was just like, how? I don't understand it. How could that be? So, but here's the other piece of it. That as I talked about it with my colleagues and my friends at CCR and other places, people said, look, you know what that is? That is internalized homophobia. We all have it. You have the best intentions in the world. You live your life in a certain way. This shit pops out sometimes. And what you can do is train yourself to not have it pop out, but most importantly, you gotta forgive yourself. You have to let it go. We know who you are. So my thought to you is, as you're struggling with that filter and you're feeling like you're not being authentic, dude, we know who you are. It would be doing you and the rest of the world of a favor if you could let some of that go and be more of who you are, because we need you.
Thank you both for sharing that and being so vulnerable in this space with us.
I'm not vulnerable.
So on a practical note, thinking about it, and Vince, you started to share some of this, but are there particular practices or reflective ways? How do you start to work through some of those things, whether it's privilege or thinking through what I did in that case, how could I have done this better? How do you work that into your daily practice when you have an avalanche of cases and everything else in the family?
Yeah, that's a good question. Reflection is really important, because I think we're very used to acting, and when you're in an active mode all of the time, that you act, then you course correct, and then you act some more. And sometimes you end up in a place that you're not sure how you got there. And so I found that finding some quiet times to think about how I got here or how we got here, where is it that I wanted to go, and is this sort of on the path? But that reflective practice is really important. And it works both in terms of litigation strategy, in terms of how you deal with movements, how you deal with your colleagues, and also with respect to how you deal with yourself. It also really helps. And the other piece that's important is we're all human beings, and we're doing great things, and we're going to be doing great things, but we're human beings. We have families, we have people that we love, we have people who love us, and it is also really helpful, that reflective moment, to think about what your purpose is in that whole sphere, not just in terms of the case, in terms of the client, in terms of the movement. What about your partner? What if you don't have a partner and you want to find a partner? So what does that mean for yourself, like where you're building in that space? And that reflective time is really, really, really important, and that's the first thing to go. The last thing that we do when we're under pressure is to stop and think, and we get we work in this trigger mode, and we're really smart folks, so we can be super, super effective. But then after a while, that muscle that says, let me think about where I am, starts to get weaker and weaker and weaker. And then you don't feel like you can take the time to reflect if you do it too much. And that's a dangerous place. That's a really dangerous place to be, I think, both for the movement, for your work, and for your own personal well-being.
I will say that I'm probably not the best person to answer this. And I have not, a lot of my practice has been fairly non-reflective. I mean, first period of time. One of the things that I would say is that really, really helped me is surrounding myself with people that are reflective, and that will not let you get away with stuff, that want to know the answer. And I really, my whole thinking took a quantum leap forward when Corby and Jose Javier Rodriguez joined me in Miami. Both of them, neither of them would let, everything was reflective. I mean, everything was, why are we doing this case? How does this fit into, what's the big picture? How does this fit in? And forced me to really think about it, and forced us all to really think about it. And a lot of the ideology of the community lawyering that we developed came out of that reflection. And then when Corby left, Mina is very similar to Corby in that sense. I mean, very reflective. So I would say, you really need to have, for the work part, for the career work, you need to surround yourself with people that really ask those questions. The students are good, but they're a little bit cowed from doing it. Corby was never cowed. I mean, the people will challenge you. People will say, how does this fit in? Wait a minute, I thought you said this, and this case doesn't fit with that. What's the story here? What are we doing here? And force you to sort of, and over time, I mean, it really helps a lot to develop principles. And instead of just, I mean, you carry these ideological principles around, but then there's the practice, and very often it's very easy for those things to get disconnected. And if you have people around that are in it with you and know how hard it is to do it, but at the same time are saying, well, wait a minute, what are we doing? How does this fit? That's a treasure, and that you don't always get that choice, but to the extent that you can find those people, do it. And then there's also, I mean, you've got to have personal practices of not just reflection I really feel deeply, and I don't know if this fits in this part, but of exercise and meditation. That if you're going to last, you have got to be able to do that on a regular basis. And I mean, regular, regular means every day, but it doesn't happen. I mean, I find it hard to do it every day, but I try really hard. If I stop exercising, just jogging, I feel it right away, and it affects my judgment. It affects and meditation. I try to do it. I try to do it every day, but I don't do it every day. But you've got to get practices like that for yourself, particularly now when you're young, to do it, because I mean, it isn't a joke when they talk about how many lawyers are alcoholics. I mean, there's a reason behind that. It's not because it really is. It is whatever your practice is, there's people depending on you. There are high pressure situations, and you're living with it, and you're living with it day in and day out. You can talk about work-life balance. I haven't, what that means is trying to get your life somehow into balance, but I haven't seen many people that really are able to do it in a way that is really comfortable. It takes an enormous toll, and you've got to start at the very beginning to deal with that, and to keep your body and your mind in shape, in the kind of shape that can remain centered in the course of it. And I mean that. I mean, people joke about it, but it's not a joke. It is a pressure that, self-medication is an easy way out. And you don't want to do that.
Yeah, could I say something? Because I think one of the things that's incredibly important is really learning to listen, and not just to what people are saying, but sometimes to what they're not saying. And for me, that first experience came years before I went to law school, when I was working in a factory doing organizing, and you walk into a situation where you don't realize at first that you're reacting to things as a person who's accustomed to white privilege. You're, oh my God, there's a half hour for lunch and you're putting your food on the back of an industrial oven to heat it up, and everybody's eating in the locker room. But you learn, because you're working there, you're in the same situation as everybody else is in, that if you're going to do organizing work, you have to listen to what the issues are of your coworkers, and that's how what starts you off listening, But years later, when I did go to law school, I'd say one of my first experiences, I went to CUNY Law. I love CUNY. I was in the Immigrants' Rights Clinic, and I was working on political asylum cases, and this was before rape was understood as a basis of political persecution for women. And I had a client from Liberia whose attorney was a male, and she had not been able to tell him what she experienced. And when I met with her, she started talking to me because I was a woman. And I found out, among many other things, that she had been raped in front of her 12-year-old son. And I mean, we ultimately won her case, but to learn to listen, to learn to what people can't say and what they can say. And I carried that with me through all the years I did legal work, because you may not come from living in the same circumstances as your clients did, but it's their lives, and you have to learn to listen to them and what's important to them. And when you go out and you fight cases for people, the most important thing is fighting for what your clients want and not what you think they should get. And that's what I have to say about that.
It's an incredibly important thing. And there are a couple to just unpacking that even a little bit more. I mean, the one thing, figuring out what your client wants as opposed to what you think they ought to want is a really important thing. Another really important thing is listening to your client for what happened, what happened to them. And one of the things I've seen over and over and over again with young lawyers, with students, and with all of us, I mean, we carry around in our own mind a picture of the world, of everything. And when somebody opens their mouth and starts saying anything, I went into my house. Well, everybody in this room has a picture of a house, and it's all going to be based on their own life experience. It's not based. The one thing it's not based on is what that person meant by house. And you've got to start to decide. You want to find out what they mean, not what your picture is, or you'll never learn. You never experience their lives. And you can't be an advocate unless you're able to hear them, to hear what their lives are. I really think that's incredibly, incredibly important.
So I think we want to talk a little bit about, besides work-life balance, and we're not taking some on the more practical side, how do you stay organized with all the work you have and prioritize amongst that? I know
I have
wanted
a
to
thing.
share some of this.
The technique that I use looks a little bit like this. It's got 4 main compartments. And in this compartment, this is where I list the things that are urgent and important. And this is where the things that are urgent, that are not urgent and important. This stuff is the stuff that is urgent but not important. And this stuff is the not urgent, not important. Now, the thing that it's like, people are like, why, that makes sense, that's pretty obvious. But when you start thinking about the type of things that you put in this box and where you spend most of your time, that is a very good gauge of how focused and effective you are. So by urgent, what you want to think about, particularly for lawyers, urgent are things like that are time bound. You have a deadline, right? You have a filing deadline. And so a filing deadline, in case you didn't know this, is always urgent and important. A filing deadline does not have to be urgent and important. If you've got a filing deadline 3 months from now and you start working on it beforehand, it's not urgent yet because it's 3 months away, but it's still important because it's a deadline. So when you find in your life and in your practice that you are always spending your time on, I have to make this phone call today, the doctor's appointment for the kids is tomorrow, but I haven't done the thing yet, I gotta write this check before the deadline. You can spend all of your life in this urgent and important box. And you'll get it done because you're awesome people. But when we were talking about reflection before, when we were talking about where am I going, what am I doing, you will never ever spend any time doing that if you live in this box. And so things that are urgent but not important, that is where you have to make a phone call, somebody's calling you back with this other thing, but you're really thinking, I know that I should do it, but is this really what I'm going to prioritize over the other things? And so and then the stuff that is not urgent and not important is pure procrastination. It's when you're on the website and you're going to look up the thing, and then you're like, oh yeah, my friend told me about this cat video, and then you're doing the cat videos for a long time, right? And then you're like Facebook, and that is a great escape, but we should not kid ourselves that it is not eating up our time, and we should not kid ourselves that it is either urgent or important. So, this is a really good thing. The place that you want to spend your life, I think, both in terms of sustainability and in terms of thinking through and being innovative, is the stuff, focusing on stuff that is not urgent, but is important. So we are not up on a deadline so you can really think through what it is, but it is important. You have to get it done. It's the key to your success. It's like, even in the job search, I know that when you were talking about what are the key things moving forward, people were like saying jobs. I know, but nobody wrote that down, right? People said, well, where am I going to get a job? But even in a job search, right, there is the job that you are going to get because the market says these jobs are available. But there's the job that you are going to have down the road. Maybe they haven't invented the job yet. It's about the work. That is always an urgent and important. You need to stay focused on the place where we need you, the place where you want to be, even if it's not the job that you're working on right now. So this is my little tool. Don't ever live down here. Don't spend too much time up here. This is the sweet spot where you work.
I remember my first computer had 10 megs of memory, not RAM, 10 megs of memory. But all these systems work the same, and that is, you want to make sure that there is no deadline, and what this does is gets you the list of things that you then put into Vince's urgent thing. And what I'm doing now, but there's lots of case management systems that all do the same thing in different ways. And part of the problem is that each one has a flaw, has something that doesn't work quite well for you, and then you have all these different platforms that you try to move things between. It makes it really difficult. Right now, I'm using Excel. I have a spreadsheet in Excel, and I use it, and it's basically just a spreadsheet. And I will have, and I have a column over here, and every case or project gets a line. And I haven't sort of divided up by some categories, but every project gets a line. And then I have a column, and these columns have switched around. But I have a column where I just sort of lay out a little bit about the case, just to remind me if I don't remember what it is. And then I have over here the deadlines, the hard deadlines, the either internal or external, mostly external deadlines or filing deadlines over here. And then in here is the to-dos. I just put what's got to get done for that case. And then I go through that, and I have to go through it once a week. But I try to go through it even more than that to kind of keep refreshing it. And then what happens is when you get through the whole thing, you have a list of to-dos of everything that you've got to do. Then you've got to do something. Then I take these to-dos and put them into another, either cut and paste or do something with them, and that's changing all the time. Put them into a Word document or something where you can just cross them off and go down and sort them into things I do today, things I do tomorrow. That's where ideas like Vince's really, really help. But you've got to have a system like this, where you cannot forget a case, where you cannot, no case can get lost. you've got to have a system where every case is looked at on a regular basis, so that you've got, if there's something that's got to be done, it comes back up. And then, I mean, these deadlines get into calendars, that sort of thing. But that's you got to have something, whether it's a case management system. This is just a case management system and work in Excel. But I mean, there are lots of others that are. We're talking about whether you can set one up in Evernote. I don't know. There's professional ones you can buy for $1 zillion that do it all for you. Our firm has one that is so clunky that it would take me, a day and a half to do that.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do it, and then it's not useful at the other end.
Thank you also. Unfortunately, I think we just got the 1 minute warning, so that they're going to have to listen to Hear Harry Belafonte, which is not unfortunately at all. It's a wonderful little thing. But I just wanted to thank both our panelists and for all of you for being here today and sharing with us and Post-it note with each other. It was incredibly inspiring to hear all of it, so thank you very much.